Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to Red and Camerimage for making this possible. My name is Markus Förderer, and I shot this movie September 5. It played actually last year at Camerimage, but I couldn't come. I was filming in Australia, so I'm glad this year I can talk a bit about the process. And the film is like a role model, but in general I want to talk a bit about pre-production and look development, which hopefully you can apply to your own work. And just in case you haven't seen the film, there's a short trailer, which I'm just going to quickly play, and then we're going to talk about it.
Ready, camera one. Hit it.
Good morning, I'm Jim McKay speaking to you live from the Olympics in Munich, West Germany.
Talk me through the day.
Starts with volleyball, then there's boxing.
Good. It's America versus Cuba.
Sure you want to bring in the politics?
It's not about politics, it's about emotions. And we're clear. Great job, everyone. Do you hear that?
Were those gunshots?
What's the situation?
The police are reporting that armed terrorists have attacked the Israeli athletes.
There's a hostage situation going on right now in the Olympic Village.
ABC wants news to take over.
Your sports, you're in way over your head.
We're 100 yards away from where this is happening.
We are the only people capable of following it live.
This is our story, and we're keeping it.
What about other cameras?
What do you mean?
I mean, can we show someone being shot on live television?
We're on.
The peace of what have been called the Serene Olympics was shattered this morning. The games are still going on. Within a few hundred yards, 9 terrified living human beings are being held prisoner.
You need to understand how sensitive the situation is.
These are just local cops doing things they have never done before.
We'll make it broadcast history. More people have seen this than watch Armstrong land on the moon.
Now, police are on the roof.
Oh, guys.
That's a TV. Are they seeing what we're seeing?
What are you talking about?
Are the terrorists seeing this?
Our job is to tell the story of these individuals whose lives are at stake.
It's not okay if we made it worse.
It's a madhouse down here.
They know the whole world is watching. If they shoot someone on live television, whose story is that? Is it ours or is it theirs?
So, thank you. Yeah, so this was a really unique project. The director is Tim Fehlbaum. We started making movies together. This was our 3rd collaboration. And before we did like science fiction films. This was the first time we did something historic that's based on true events. And we had also the responsibility with the images to do this event justice. There's so much press coverage out there and clips you can watch on YouTube today. So when we had to recreate images, it was very important for us to make it feel authentic, but it's still like a movie, it's not a documentary, so we had to find this balance of recreating this 70s aesthetic, but creating our own like visual language. So a couple of points I want to talk about. Basically, I'm very passionate about lenses and lens selection. Choosing the right lens as a creative storytelling tool, and what I find is important and interesting to look out for, the camera and lens testing part, and tuning of lenses. Everybody wants to tune and detune lenses these days, so we have to talk about that. And a bit about texture and grade, that's part of the whole process. And then the lighting techniques we used, and some fun in-camera effects. So basically, we had the challenge. We shot this film, I think, 2 years ago. And some of the original locations in Munich, they are like a protected heritage site. They still exist. If you point the camera in the right direction, it almost looks like in the 70s. We had to be careful what to show, what not to show. but it still looks like present day. And I don't know how you feel like every time I watch a movie that's set in a certain period, like I always ask myself, do you really imitate the look? How did films look like in that period? Or do you create something new? But I find myself, if something looks like too contemporary, I have a hard time buying into the period. Like here we had the challenge, you don't want the audience to get distracted and feel like there's people walking around in costumes and makeup, and this feels like it was just shot as if it was shot today. So this was some of the swim race we had to replicate. These are some behind the scenes pictures. We did not have any budget for crowd or like CG crowds, so we had to be very careful what to show. There's a lot of, like if you have seen the film, a lot of the movie takes place in a control room. The whole idea, this was the first time the Olympics were broadcast live in history, so it was a very new process for everyone. So our characters observe a lot of the what's taking place on monitors, and when people watch the film, they usually think it's stock footage or archival footage, but it's actually quite difficult to get permission to get this, especially this footage from that event. So we had to recreate, also for narrative reasons, certain events, and where it was just impossible to get the footage. So we used a couple of wide shots, that's original 60mm or analog video, but the majority, I would say almost 80%, what you see in the control room on the TVs is recreated with lots of fun cameras. We're going to talk about that. So I think, to me, like the lens is the most important thing. Every time I go into pre-production, before I even think about what camera or format, I think about what lens do I want the audience to see that film through. And then I feel like what camera fits, or sensor or film format fits that image circle or format chosen. And like when we talk about lenses and the look, like I think these are some key points I look out for when choosing a lens. Like I want a certain three-dimensionality. People, obviously, an image captured on film or digital is a 2D image, but I don't know, everybody's talking about a 3D pop. What is this? I'm going to show a bit of examples. In my opinion, you can ask many people and get different answers. Then the filmic contrast is very important. Like there's a lot of very sharp, high contrast modern lenses that are super coated, and they almost look, I don't know, you get like maybe too plasticky skin tones, and it looks almost like live action footage can end up looking like CG. So we was looking for something that creates that 70s aesthetic. Focus fall off, bokeh, and flare. Big topic for me is the flare in testing. Even in September 5, you will see almost no flares. But purposefully, we try to avoid flares. But I think it's very important when you test lenses to look at the flare, because it tells you almost everything about the lens. So when I did research of, like, we thought, like, how would we capture this today? Like, we would put our actors in that scenario, and we want to capture this as if we were a documentary crew observing what's happening, and that was our whole idea, to follow the events as they unfold in real time, like like the characters say in the film. So what we actually did, we, like Tim Philbon, the director, and the actors, they talked about the scene, but we never did proper blocking. We had, of course, an idea that somebody would most likely look at the main monitor in that scene, but no rehearsal, and we would shoot the entire scene every time as a oneer with 2 cameras, always with the intention to tighten it up in editing. Like, we talked for a long time, should we do this as a one-shot film, which is very popular, right? But then I feel personally, you always force your audience to now follow in real time somebody's head walking through a corridor for 50 seconds, which can feel like 5 minutes in a movie. And in the topic of the film is the media and the power of the images. So editing, what you show, what you don't show, is so important. So we knew we wanted to also play with editing. So, but we captured everything in one long shot to create this energy. I'm gonna show a bit more about it. So actually, I did this research. How would they have captured it? What cameras and lenses they had? And there's a special edition of the American Cinematographer magazine from '72 that was purely dedicated on the Olympics '72 because it was such a technological milestone, the first live broadcast, and they had invited directors and world-class filmmakers from all over the world to document this event. And it was fascinating to read these interviews, but it's very difficult to find any information about the lenses used. Today, if you talk to a cinematographer, like we all talk about, oh, I use this lens, we detuned that. Back in the '70s, I think they talked a bit about what film stock, what camera, but my guess is, I wasn't around, I'm too young, but that there were so few lens options that it was almost a given that there was a lens on the camera, but it's not like today where we have literally hundreds of different lens sets to choose from. There was only a handful. So I actually looked at advertisement in the magazine in between what lenses they advertised, and I found a couple of pictures that showed actually the cameraman and photographers. And most of the lenses used for the Olympics are obviously very long telephoto lenses. But I knew in our case we are in a very tight, confined room. We need wide lenses, and also I wanted to work with zooms to create this energy by adjusting the shot while we're filming. But I found there's this company called Voigtlander Zoomar. They made a Zoomar, which I wasn't aware it's the first zoom lens ever made for 35 millimeter stills cameras, but they also made the early zooms for 60 millimeter and then 35 millimeter. And that company actually came from Munich, and the Olympics, our film takes place in Munich. I thought, this is a sign, we have to get this Zoomar. And we ended up shooting some on the original Zoomar. I'll show some of that in a bit. And then I asked myself always, what are the actual requirements on that project? Some cinematographers, they choose the same camera and lens kit every time, and you know what you're expecting. But I always try to start fresh, and in this case, I know we wanted the 70s feel in every frame, so I knew I wanted a certain low contrast and this soft, flary image, especially in these control rooms back in the day. They smoked a lot. If you worked in the media industry, especially in live broadcast, I think the tension was so high, they were non-stop smoking. So all these rooms were smoky, and I wanted to show this in the lenses and in the contrast that the blacks are slightly soft. And I knew in tight spaces we need great close focus and zoom lenses, and they have to be fast so we can work with available light. So I went to several rental houses. I started at Old Fast Glass in LA. They have so many amazing vintage lenses, and I tested all the typical candidates like the K35 zoom and old Cook zooms from the time, and I realized quickly they look nice, but also very beautiful, golden flares, and felt somehow this doesn't feel right for the serious tone. And I also noticed these things are big and heavy, and the mechanics are tough to work with. I felt this might not be the best tool to go with, but I chose that one Zoomar. There's now a rehoused version on the right. On the left side is the original Zoomar. So we ended up, at the time there was just one or two in the world that rehoused for film. I actually bought 2 copies of eBay because I wanted the original that's way smaller and lighter. It doesn't have as good a close focus, but so we used this for some shots, but I mixed several different lens types, and I'll explain a bit why. And like I mentioned, flares are so important to me when judging a lens, and you might all understand this, but just to cover the basics, if you have a lens, this is a rough idea. The light enters the lens from the left side all the way to the sensor or film, whatever you capture on. And every lens is made out of several lens elements, and on every lens surface, some light is reflected. Modern high-end multi-coated lenses, they reflect only 0.2%, almost nothing. But older lenses, especially uncoated or single-coated lenses, they reflect 3 to 5%. So every lens surface that adds up 3% here, 5% there, 3% there. So in the early days, the lens designers always try to create perfect lenses that have almost no flare, because the flare means light is reflected, and the film stock in the early days, it was very slow, right? You didn't have. Today we can shoot 800 ASA, 1600 ASA or higher, so that's not really a criteria anymore. But back then they wanted to get as much exposure on the film, and that's why I think you see this trend today that maybe filmmakers are more open to shoot on older lenses. This is a quick example. This is this shot with the exact same light source, the same camera, same exposure. The color of the lens is revealed when you shine light into the lens. Like on the left side is a Kawa Cinepromenade that has this gold coating, creates very warm golden flares. On the right side is a Zeiss Super Speed that's more cooler. And you can quickly see, especially when you talk to a director who might not see the nuance on the test chart or the face, but by flaring a lens, you can quickly see, oh, these two lenses are very radically different. Something is different, and I want to explore more. And maybe this feels right or not. This is an example of the lens coating is so important. There's some rental houses, they offer uncoated lenses. This is a Zeiss Super Speed. On the top left, you see the coating was removed, actually mechanically by polishing off. You see actually even little microscopic scratch marks. And on the bottom right, that's the original coating. So some lens elements show up. This can get very milky, but it's an interesting choice for like a period look. For us, this was a bit too extreme. So I ended up actually using a mix of different lenses and formats because the film, like when we looked at all the archival footage and the references of the time, it was such a media event. The people at the time, they saw analog video, they saw 16mm, 35, like through telecine, and stills in print media. Like it was this whole 70s feel. We wanted to capture this, and I thought by choosing just one format, it might be a bit too, polished. And so I wanted to choose different formats in different scenes depending on what's happening in the story. So we ended up using that Zoom-R for certain shots. That's like a full frame, like large format image circle, which is amazing. And then on the bottom left, that's also made by the same company as the first macro lens. It's a Zoom-R 90mm macro Keelar, I think it's called, which gets you crazy close focus, because I knew like we had so many inserts on people touching film and inserts on buttons and microphones. We knew we had not many opportunities for big wide shots and scope, but that the inserts would become like our landscape. So that was very important to find a lens that captures this. And then like about half the film is shot on a detuned modern lens. On the top left, it's a picture zoom. And then we had anamorphic lenses every time the tension is high. And this shows a bit. That's actually one of the big reasons why we ended up shooting on the Raptor, because of that multi-format sensor. So I wanted to have one camera system, not that we shoot like 60mm film or different or a large format Super 35. You can quickly choose change from 60mm mode to Super 35mm mode, and we used Vista Vision, large format for certain scenes, and then anamorphic, and it's like a push of a button, no rebooting, no nothing, and you can immediately see the result. And this is a bit, I want to talk a bit about that flare testing process. So I started years ago building a whole platform. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's called Cineflares. It's like a database where I started capturing lenses. It started first with just flare, all shot with motion control in a controlled environment. Because I don't know if sometimes you see like an assistant in a test room with a flashlight and a test chart waving around, but every angle you change the light makes the result very different. So I realized to really analyze a lens and make an informed decision, I have to compare. I would like to compare. Like I think we humans are very good, like not like AI. We're very good. If you show us two options, we will say this one we like better for whatever reason, instinctively or whatever we think is the better reason. So built this platform, and there's now a whole website. If you're interested, you can check it out, cineflares.com. And how that works is, so every project I first start like doing a big research on maybe looking at lenses from a period or whatever characteristics it are, there's the same amount of lenses on the left side and right side, and you can search for all kinds of things. You can search by movie name, for example, show me the lenses that were used to shoot Dune, for example, and let's say find a lens from like a nice period lens, this Kawa Cinepromenade we looked at earlier. And then you can select your focal length and your T-stop, because every stop obviously makes a difference. So I change, go to 32 millimeter, maybe T2. And when you hit play, this is all, it's like a time code synced motion control. This shows you how the lens looks like in front of black. And even sometimes you think like, oh, I don't like this lens, but maybe you just don't like it at that stop. So sometimes I compare the same lens at different stops, and you might find like wide open is too extreme. There's some really interesting lenses, for example, the Bausch & Lomb Super Baltars, which I also looked at because they're have a very nice low contrast feel to them, but they create a very unique effect, especially the 35 it is, I think, which lens designers called narcissism. Lens narcissism is when the lens shows up itself, like you see a reflection of the inside of the lens. So I select on the left side and right side the exact same lens, a 35 millimeter Bausch & Lomb. On the left side it's wide open. On the right side I stop down to a T4. And you will see that actually the iris blades on the right side, that center reflection you see, is actually a reflection of the iris blades. We're not looking into the lens, this is a reflection of the iris blades. So when I open let's say on the left side I stop to a T2.8, that's somewhere in between, just gonna go forward. So you see it a little, and you might say, oh my God, this is so distracting, we cannot shoot on this lens, but maybe you shoot an opening sequence to the next Bond movie, this could be very interesting. Like, there's no such thing as a bad lens, right? You just have to be aware, and it's like maybe sometimes I've seen something, I don't think that's good, but then 5 years later, like, wow, I think on this shot, on that whatever opening sequence, or is it a commercial or something, that could be really interesting. And then I just want to show this a little bit for a second. What is new lights? We just added some new lights. Thalia. There's some. It's really interesting, especially when sometimes you have discussions. Should we shoot anamorphic or spherical? And it might be more. It might be a financial thing, also for producers to see what that means. And like I mentioned earlier, I think they might not see the difference on a test chart. But if you show that flare, you see immediately what's going on. Let's say Todd AO is a very interesting one, especially the 38. If you compare a spherical lens with an anamorphic lens, that Todd AO, I think there were only very few made, especially that 38 that has very extreme also reflections of oily iris blades and lots of texture when people talk about textures. And for all the new stuff we have also like bokeh references and stuff like that. It's a never-ending system. And then if you want to see how that lens would look like in the real world, there's what's called a scene preview, where you can compare how the lens looks like at different stops. So that, let's say Todd AO 38 is the crazy one. If I go, now it's wide open. If I stop down to 5.6, you see, compared to a spherical lens, maybe this might be too distracting, but for something where you want a lot of texture, this is the way to go. And you can see this at day and night. At night you see it better. And I always use this in my early process. If I like something, you can save it. And then this is my personal selects, and you do project folders. It's a bit like shot deck for lenses. If you're really nerd about lenses, go for it. And that creates a spec sheet with all the references and some relevant movies. We don't capture all movies, but a couple of movies that hopefully stand the test of time. And yeah, so this is always the first step. I go through that archive or test specifically some new lenses for it. And then I think you cannot do a universal lens test that captures everything, but once I know these 3-4 lenses I think are interesting, then I go to rental house and test specifically for the project. Like maybe you have candlelight scenes or some special night exterior, so I go to rental house and test with candles and find a face. You might not have access to the actors yet, but something that looks relevant. And then I think what's so important is this 3D pop I talked about. Like most lenses, like they're designed like in the late 2000s and newer lenses, they're designed to be rectilinear and very perfect and even. That means a test chart looks perfectly correct, but once you film a 3-dimensional face, it looks flat. Like, what does that mean? Like, you can see it in when you shoot like little dots. It's like a bokeh chart. On the left side, it's in focus. On the right side, focus is pulled towards close focus. So you see that the bokeh is not even, but it appears, it's an optical illusion. It appears as if the center of the image comes out of the screen. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's how it appears to me. And so imagine a face. If you have a perfectly flat focal plane, it's flat, but you get more roundness of the face. So there's several aspects that add up, and that's important to when you choose your camera and sensor format. So if you use obviously a larger format sensor, you will see more of that image circle. You will see more of that fall off if that lens has that kind of fall off. So here you see it in focus and close focus, how it pops out in the center. And this is like in a real world scenario. On the left side, you see a more modern lens that's fairly even, the bokeh. You could say this looks very pleasing and natural. On the right side, that's like a Lights Hugo, which is a Noctilux, which is based on the Noctilux 50mm Leica lens, which has, it's a radical lens design that has like opens up to a T1 that has this slight swirliness, but the center again you feel like it's almost as if the trees come more out of the screen. Here you see both lenses in close focus. On the left side, the more modern lens. On the right side, the more vintage lens. But you have to test, like not every like old vintage lens automatically has the same characteristics. And there's now even new lenses being designed that try to mimic older lens designs. And the next part that is a very similar effect is obviously lens distortion. You see on the left side a rectilinear lens that's flat, and on the right side a lens with some barrel distortion. So the center again appears, it's an optical illusion, it appears to come more out of the screen. Versus if you had a pincushion design, to me it feels like it goes behind the screen, it goes in away from the audience. And then the next factor is the light fall off, that all adds up to the same optical illusion. So on the left side is a very even lens, on the right side a lens that has a lot of fall off. So sometimes you can create this if you shoot on a larger sensor like the Raptor that's bigger than, it's like even wider than full frame. You get on some lenses that are designed for full frame a little bit of that fall off, and you can either, or you use a modern lens that covers the whole sensor, no problem, but I sometimes look for lenses that barely fit in that image circle and you get this fall off. And here you see basically once all these characteristics add up, like the flare, the fall off, the vignette, the distortion, and like of course the field of view you choose, like what focal length, this all adds up to that three-dimensional expression of a lens. All right, so when we tested in the beginning, the film actually was budgeted to shoot on film, and like when we talked about early on with Tim Philbaum, the director, and I, like we thought like this takes place in the 70s. It all screams like we should shoot on film, and the producers were on board, and I thought it was such a great opportunity. But I kept thinking, knowing the director who likes to shoot very long takes, and the way we like approached it, like we did some tests. I knew the monitors, TV monitors, were so integral, and all the formats I wanted to mix. And we did several tests. We compared 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, and then digital. And we had like these different challenges, like once sometimes we had to recreate footage that plays on an old TV. So on the top, on the bottom left, you see the original archival of the terrorist for the first time on the balcony. There was a very iconic image at the time that was printed in newspapers all around the world and shown on TV. And we knew we had to recreate this and like all the other images in that scene surrounding it. So there I shot some 60mm, but I knew we needed a small sensor, like deep depth of field. And these are some other scenes that look like super low tech, but I actually ended up shooting them on an 8K sensor. Some of it even like on the Raptor, but some even an older, it's a red helium that has a smaller sensor. And I used the smallest sensor crop to get close to that original analog cameras. They had like cathode, it's not a sensor, it's like an analog imaging process. To get a similar field of view and depth of field, I used the highest in-camera raw compression to really destroy the image as much as I could. And then we fed this feed on an analog TV that's like, we shot in Germany, so it's a PAL, super low res TV, and then we filmed that off again with an 8K camera in our scene, which creates this authentic look. You get the real pixelation of the monitor, so you end up, even by using a very modern tool, you can create a very authentic look. But this gave us the control and flexibility. We didn't have to have special cameras for special applications. We could, the shooting schedule was so tight. We had like, I think 27 days on the sound stage where all that, the control room was built and the surrounding offices. And then for, I think 2 or 3 days, we went to the Olympic Village to capture those exterior pieces, but we had to always like mix material on the day, so it was really helpful to have one camera that can do it all. So lens tuning. So what I talked about earlier, these key characteristics, like I want to touch those all and make the perfect lens for that film. So what I mentioned earlier, I tested these old lenses. They looked interesting, but they didn't check all the boxes. Like they were too big, too heavy, or not fast enough. And also some were like making the image too good looking, too pretty, and I wanted a certain grittiness. So I ended up, several things. The Anamorphics look great out of the box, but I bought a set of these picture zooms. They're quite affordable. And I thought, you always hear like lens technicians detuning lenses and all that stuff. And I knew September 5, when it started, it was a very small film. Like we had no idea that it would like get the Oscar nomination and get picked up by Paramount. So when we shot this in Munich, we were like friends from film school. I thought like this is a movie like I can experiment and be bold. So I bought these lenses, and I thought I want to detune those lenses myself. I'm not a lens technician at all, and I have to say disclaimer: don't try this at home. Because it was interesting, because I did like for years these flare tests and lens tests with Cineflare, so I had a good understanding, I think, what I want to touch, but I had no idea how challenging it would be to put it back together. So it's quite simple to take a lens apart, and like I had very little prep time. I came from I did this Apple TV show in Berlin, and I had I think 10 days of prep for this film. Like for years we scouted the locations before it was financed, and we did test shoots on weekends when I could come to Munich. So I had a long time to process, and we knew where we wanted to go, but from the time I wrapped my previous project to the actual shoot was like 10 days. And one of those days I spent in my office with that lens. I thought it would take like an hour, but it took the entire day. So I disassembled it, and did all kinds of things. I literally also put fingerprints on every lens element. Like once you take it apart, I kept the center clear, and on the inside, the underside, to get the three. Like when you use a filter, you have this, like a diffusion filter, you have this flat overall diffusion effect. And I knew in September 5, we couldn't have windows. The whole idea was in that it's like a TV studio, the compound, they have no windows, and the director was insisting. All I do is like bring light through windows. I said, how should I light this thing? And the director said, no, I want no windows. They should feel really claustrophobic, and we want the audience to feel that. So I knew we would have some, based on the original couple of photos we found from that control room, that like hanging suspended lights and some built-in practicals. I knew I wanted to get this glare and then like this smoky feel from it. So that's why we did like fingerprinting, dust particles. Like if you look at old vintage lenses, there's literally dust in them sometimes, and that makes part of the look, if you ask me. If you did, like when you do a lens rehousing, you might find your favorite lenses, and then they rehouse them and polish and clean everything. It ends up looking almost like a modern lens again. But it took me an hour to take it apart, do all this process. I've played with some lenses, and I also knew when I will put it back together, not measuring properly. So I think this will all give us the funk. And it took me the entire day to put it back together, and nothing worked. Like the focus, the zoom was stuck. I was so happy that even I could get it back together, but nothing worked. And so I went to our rental camera house, Airy Rental in Munich. They were so helpful. Like, thank you, Manfred Jahn, like the boss of the lens department. I gave it his lens. Like, can you make this work? But don't touch the glass elements. And 15 minutes later, he came back. It worked like brand new. So I had the best of that. So this shows just for the flare, the bottom is the stock lens, and the top, some of the modifications. There's some stuff I did with elements to get in additional flares that are warmer, but not too golden. And around the light source, you'll see there's more of that bloom effect, but nothing too crazy. And then every time, like I shot, like a lot of the films I've shot in the past, they were anamorphic, and I thought like this is maybe, again, a perfect opportunity to shoot spherical. And every time I test spherical, I said, this is a really cool lens, I want to shoot it, but then I end up shooting anamorphic most of the time. So in this film, also like just close before the film, I thought this is, I think I can't just shoot only spherical, something is missing. And I figured like whenever the tension is high in the control room, we switch to anamorphic. It was just like a thought. And I did this, like luckily everybody's busy on the film shoot, like the director wants to talk to the actors, everyone like doing touch-ups in between, so every time I felt, we couldn't plan this out, like there was scenes in the script I could mark, this seems more tense, so a couple I had planned, but then I wanted to intuitively feel it out, so we had the luxury to afford to have different lens sets on site, so I could say quickly to my brilliant assistants, they were like, lifesaver, let's quickly go to the anamorphic lens. It's like one click in the menu, you're in anamorphic mode, and nobody actually can tell why going through all this, right? But I feel really, if you watch it on a big screen, you feel the tension of the anamorphic bokeh, and there's several layers that add up to that tension. And then we, like I mentioned, like we thought about shooting film, and one of the reasons also why we didn't end up shooting film is the TV monitors. I wanted them to be like a key light source. Like if you watch films from the 70s, they tend to be quite overlit. Like sometimes people watch this film and say like, oh, this looks like really like from the 70s, and I would argue it does not, but hopefully it evokes the feeling of that era. And so when you watch films which have TVs, they're quite overlit. The TV light doesn't do much on 500 ASA. If you push it a bit, you have to be very close. But I really wanted this to feel like a light source. So that's when we shot on the Raptor 1600 ASA. We did shoot for some of the archival footage. We used 16mm, and I shot some references in that control room because I was curious for the grade later. And we discussed in the beginning, should we shoot everything black and white or part? So we ended up actually doing part of it in black and white that they see on the monitors. This was part of the look process where we compared different film emulation and heliation and all that stuff. So you can work on this forever, like a brilliant colorist, Utsi, with whom I worked several times. But I really learned that nothing is as strong as the lighting and a combination of lighting and lensing in finding that look. Like here, a lot of the reference images we found, there's only maybe 10 or so from the control room, from the ABC control room, and they were all very bright. Like they looked like this, and everybody, the art department, they printed this in the office for reference, and I thought like, somehow this doesn't feel right. And I realized at some point the film again was so slow. When they took pictures, they used a flash, they turned on all the lights to even see it. But obviously, if you ever worked in a control room, it's usually tends to be very dark to not have reflections on the monitor. So we wanted to play dark, make the monitors glow. We tested film, and that's where I saw the film did some magic sometimes. Once in a while, when we did, this was our early test shoot with just a couple of monitors, there was some magic in skin tones that a digital camera just wouldn't come up with. But most of the time we had other problems, like I would have to have like light and height light sources. And the way we wanted to film in these long one-ers with 2 cameras, I knew this is just not possible with that schedule, and it would just lead to a different aesthetic. And then talking about the lighting, like this was so important to me. When you read the script, there's like a bunch of guys and 2 ladies, they're staring at monitors most of the time. How do you make this interesting and suspenseful? So I wanted to feel like the reflection of the monitors in the eyes. Like many years ago, I shot a movie called Eye Origins, which was all about the eyes, and I learned so much about eye lights and how to, even if you go dark, how you can be moody, but you feel the life in the performance of an actor. And here, I thought this interesting part is to see multiple eye lights, where you get a sensation with the sound mixed together, and obviously the audio, what they're watching, that even if you can't fully see let's say the terrorist, the masked man on the balcony, you feel it. And we did several techniques. Sometimes we used the real monitor wall, but even all the way to using an iPad with a mask, like a fake version of the monitor wall. I just did a black mask with bright images and brought it really close to the actor's eye, so it would reflect. And an iPad gets actually quite bright these days. This is a case, though. This is the real monitor wall. And then there's a sequence towards the end of the film when the hostages are flown on a helicopter to a military airport, and there's a shootout happening. And the archival footage that existed from the time was almost pitch black. There's an area, there were no street lights, it was very remote, and you could not see anything. And I thought, the director too, like, this sounds spooky, let's recreate this, let's not go for big condors and fake moonlight and make this like a movie night. I said, how can we recreate this? And the original part, there was some color and black and white, but I said, let's shoot just black and white. That allows us to go really high sensitivity on the camera. So we shot 6,400 ASA, sometimes even higher, to use the car headlights. There's like a traffic jam where onlookers started looking towards the airport where this shootout happens. And so we used the car headlights, and then with my lighting team, we were hiding battery-powered LEDs in between the lights to silhouette. And we had smoke machines to, like back in the day, those cars would actually, they push out quite of smoky exhaust on those old cars. So we enhanced this by having battery-powered smoke machines spread out. Like, it was a very long road. And this way we could shoot 360 without seeing any condors, any film equipment. And I just had one lighting technician with some sort of a China ball walking with me to fill the faces as we go close. So this was fascinating to see. In color, this looked not good, but in black and white, that really led to this 16mm quality by pushing the sensors so far. There's some more. And there you see like this bloomy thing that comes through the detuning of the lens, that you don't even see the light source where it's coming from. But it hopefully gives it that analog feel. These are a couple of images. So the control room, everything was built interconnected. So Julian Wagner, the production designer, and his team, they did a great job. We looked at it for a while. Can we find a location that works? But we knew with these long one-ers, we need everything interconnected. So we built a set on a film studio that's inspired by the original floor plan, but slightly modified so we can connect everything. Rooms have windows to other rooms, so we always see this depth, even if it's like a claustrophobic story that it still has this depth. So all the lighting had to be built into the set. So this all you see, like these old bulbs and tubes, are actually modern LED tubes and LED bulbs. Because we had so little time, I knew I want like flexibility and have everything on a dimmer board so we can quickly turn around. We don't have to gel lights or switch them out, like, you know, with tungsten bulbs. If you dim them, they go warmer. And like, I wanted this to look exactly how I wanted it to look, but as fast and seamless as possible. So like, Tim has the most time with the actors to work on the scene, and I know we want to shoot as much as possible. Like that, this is just the energy when you put these actors in a room, and like there's no marks, and like sometimes you have to play the scene 2-3 times to find some unique energy, and then you realize maybe we just watch this from outside, from the door, and if you don't have to have, like, I've been told, like, back in the good old days, like, a cinematographer had, like, 2 hours to pre-light a set and stuff, like, I think this doesn't exist anymore. Like, I also try, maybe challenge everyone in my lighting team, let's have it all built in and hidden, but you have to obviously plan through where do you need strategically placed lights that you can turn on or make brighter. Sometimes even when the camera moves away, we would fade something up that gives a bit more fill light that's off camera. And there's a few instances where there's this long corridor where the door opens, you get a sense for the outside world, but this too, I wanted this to be really blown out, so you get a sense for it there, but you're in this claustrophobic moment. You don't really get to see what happens there. The only window to the outside world are the TV monitors and like the cameras they place outside. This, I think, is the only flare in the whole film. Like, even after testing all the flares, I knew I didn't really want to show flares, except there's a short moment where the light bulb flashes. That's all shot anamorphic, because she gets a roll of film, and we see this in real time, how the film develops and what the face of the masked man for the first time. And then we had scenes in the TV studio. I'll show this in a bit. Lots of monitors and screens, and then they watch also on a Steenbeck. So for the younger people in the audience, before film, that's not a monitor. We had to also educate our audience, because you don't know who's watching it. A new generation might not understand that it's not a monitor, but it is film projected on a ground glass, basically, to watch basically the dailies. They had actually in Munich for the Olympics film lab locally that all the TV stations would share, and they could within 15 to 20 minutes quickly develop the film. It's unbelievable. And then go live into telecine. There was no film scanners, no hard drives. They would either do live telecine, put it in, play, and broadcast live. They had tapes, but and analog cameras. It was just this mix of formats. Like here you see him going through a tape. There's even a scene where you see a guy doing slow motion by slowing down the tape by hand. That's how it was done back then. It was really fascinating. That's one of the pictures from the original TV studio that was in that compound for the ABC studio in Munich. And so I knew there was all this lit with tungsten lighting, so I had to recreate this. But like I mentioned, I wanted this to be all LED, so I have color control. So for what's in camera, the lower part is the original, like old Fresnels and some soft lights, but everything above, these are like airy sky panels and some other LED lights, so we had color control, so that it was literally just for looks, those Fresnels, they were very low output, and we could really control the color and intensity of everything with LED lights. And then in the control room, like watching documentaries from the time, I always noticed that the monitors would flicker, right? When you shoot analog monitors, they flicker by nature. It's very hard to actually sync your camera to the monitor. And when you watch like a Hollywood movie, like we go through great length by modifying the TV with a special technician to run at 24 frames and gen-lock the TV to the camera. Everything looks perfect. And then I realized in our scenario, it looks almost like a burn-in, almost like a blue screen TV, because it's so perfect. And looking at those documentaries, I felt like, oh, this flicker has some, like, it creates some tension, or it gets you excited. So I did actually some research of there is actually studies, like super nerdy, but it's all about the nuance. And if you put enough nuance together in your film, hopefully the audience will feel it in a dark room. So there's studies done first with mice and later with humans. When you, in a dark room, when you pulse light at certain frequencies, it affects the heart rate. It gets your heart rate up. And as a way, the dark room, light pulsing, this sounds like a movie theater. Like hopefully people watch this in a movie theater, so we have to strobe the light. And I read about those frequencies and I did some tests, and like my wife Julie, who's a dimmer board operator, we were working on that previous project, so we asked the lighting team, can we just borrow some Astera tubes over the weekend, took it to the hotel room, and she has a dimmer board, and we tested different frequencies, like we were the lab rats, like I just turned the lights off and flickered myself and felt like, oh, if you go flicker too fast, the effect disappears, right? You don't notice it anymore. If you're too slow, you get a massive headache and you don't want to torture your audience. But there's some frequencies where it really affects your heart rate. And so what we did, I realized by playing with the shutter, I tested this too to make the actual monitors strobe with an offset in the shutter and the camera. This was super distracting. Like you cannot focus what's happening on the monitor. So the solution was actually we synced the shutter, actually not on purpose, not with Genlock and very low tech by eye. And before every take, I synced the shutter by eye so the monitor looks like it's not strobing. But we installed a row of LED lights on top that's just outside the frame. The original historic ABC control room had those yellow curtains. The art department recreated those exactly like in the original, and we used those to hide LED soft lights, and they were meant to extend the light coming from the TVs pushing in the room. Here you see some more. So in wide shots you can't see them, they're hidden by the thing, and then we programmed different flicker frequencies. So when in the beginning, you see them slightly pulsing, in the beginning when we see the control room for the first time, there's like a swim race, we established the live broadcast, how that all works, so the audience understands. There's a little bit of flicker just to get the audience conditioned to that logic. And then when it gets tense, like we put this on a fader, we could dynamically, throughout the scene, change the flicker frequency. And I think it was quite fascinating. It's very subtle. Like if hopefully you look into the actor's eyes and you don't pay attention, but throughout the scene, it's a bit compressed because this goes on a live stream. You see the ambience light pulsing. And I went so far, like throughout the entire complex, what we built, all the lights, it looks like period tubes, but these are, again, LED tubes, Astera tubes. And I wanted to avoid this perfectly polished stage look. Like when you watch a movie that's shot on location versus studio, we always say like the location has something gritty to it. And so we decided to shoot on a sound stage, but how can we take the edge off? It's not just the wall paint and a dirty lens, it's everything. So the light had to be imperfect. So I used flicker, not just like obvious flickers like on the TVs, but we programmed these lights, tubes have individual segments. So we programmed, if you remember, old fluorescent tubes, especially when they get older, they tend to flicker a bit towards the ends of the light. So I tried to recreate it. It's very subtle. If you can watch this, some gentle movement. And we had so many in the corridor, so when you look at the image, the overall exposure doesn't change. So I measured it with a light meter so that the overexposure doesn't change, but there's always some sort of movement. And when then there's like some more chaotic scene, somebody's running through the hallway, then we would actually flicker it stronger. Again, like some stuff is like super subtle, but it all helps, like the little flashes. Random that just takes the edge off. You just have to make sure you don't want to draw attention to it, so sometimes it's very subtle. Yeah. And then in camera effects, so that's the thing, I feel almost a responsibility of, like, as a cinematographer, when you're pitching to use old dirty lenses and anamorphic and change formats, it makes it very hard for visual effects actually to put objects in there. That's why you see sometimes big visual effects, blockbuster, they sometimes tend to shoot on very clean lenses because then it's more efficient to put the 3D visual effects in, and then they say we can dirty it up later, but you probably all know it is very hard to do convincing. That's why I would think, especially in a film like this, that's small, on a budget, independent, let's get it in camera as much as possible. And of course, there's some visual effects, but they're hopefully invisible because the benchmark was so high. It had this texture and grittiness. They had a reference what to match. So like in previous films with Tim, we started shooting miniatures, and I thought in this film, like when they open the door and we see the outside world, like if the moment this feels CG, it will like break that truthful effect. And there's some scenes where there's a helicopter. Actually, 2 helicopters are coming to the Olympic Village to take the hostages out and bring them to an airport. And it really happened in the Olympic Village. The Olympic Village, we found angles to shoot that look exactly like they would look like. We even investigated, can we fly real helicopters? But it was impossible to get a permit because of historic reasons. Even the German chancellor, especially, apparently was never given a permit to fly her helicopter in for any, there were ceremonies before. And also the budget was tight. So then what happens, I don't know what's your experience, but I feel every year this gets more extreme. You go have a production meeting, you go through a script with your team of filmmakers, and every time there's something on the page that's a bit complicated, like, oh, there's 2 big helicopters flying over the and landing, and the producer think, oh, that sounds expensive. Everybody points their finger to the visual effects supervisor and says, like, give us a number and let's move on, right? Like, get a quote, what that's cost, let's move on with our lives. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And the truth is, even in 2025, I think it's very hard to do convincing visual effects. Like, people think we're doing visual effects since Jurassic Park look photoreal. Why wouldn't it look real? I think it's so fragile if you don't shoot it in the right way and you don't have the right lighting and the right visual effects people and the time. Especially in some historic context, it can feel like ruin the illusion. And then it takes your audience out. So in this case, that I've got a quote for the CG helicopters. They were obviously very expensive, and I knew from like past experiences, even like on big, whatever, $150 million film, like I can tell which one's CG helicopter most of the time. It's very hard. And I saw this. Actually, I'll show this first. How we did it. So there's scenes. The helicopters arrive. They fly around the Olympic Village, and then we see them landing. There's some other shots. And how we did that, so this is how it looks in the film. On the bottom left is the original archival footage, which we're not allowed to use. And on the top left is a shot from the film. On the right, you see me filming this. And so what you see there actually is a miniature remote-controlled helicopter. On the right, you see it. And like I brought this up in production meeting, and people like, oh, this guy's crazy. But I knew, like, if you watch, there's many examples, like Dunkirk or so, they did fascinating, like, miniature. I mean, they're big. Like, this thing was 8 feet long. But so I brought this up to the producer. We found this guy online somewhere. On Instagram, there's, like, some whole groups of people doing miniature planes and stuff. And I was like, should we not, there's this guy in Munich, he bought, or somewhere in Bavaria nearby, he built this himself. Like, can we not ask the guy? And then everybody was first like, yeah, it's miniature and it's not going to work. We have to still budget for the CG to replace it. Everybody has a million reasons why something could not work. And then I asked the producer, can you please just find out how much the guy is asking for to do this? And then he came back, he wants $500. I said, like, can you please hire the guy? If it doesn't work out, I pay out of pocket. And then luckily it worked so well, they brought him back 3 more times and we shot more. And that's the thing with if you shoot for CG, sometimes you shoot a clean plate and then let's put something in later, right? But what might end up happening, actually, you yourself do mistakes, like that it can never look good. Like a good example is like the original Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien. You have a guy in a rubber suit, you look at him full frame, you say, this looks ridiculous. But the only way to shoot that in an interesting way is you have the guy in a rubber suit, and now you learn, oh, we need smoke, we need to underexpose, we need strobing lights. And then you create this magic. If you just shoot a clean plate of a corner without strobe, without smoke, without flashing lights, and you put in a perfectly photoreal CG alien in there, it will still look like a CG alien that's not scary, right? And the same goes for everything. The helicopter, so I just experimented with some frame rates. What is the right frame rate? I made it feel big, and the right lenses. Again, the key was that I tested so many lenses. So I used actually a photo lens I bought off eBay. That's a super long telephoto that has this old quality to it. So if there was a CG helicopter, it would be very difficult to integrate it in that shot, and I would have had to shoot with a clean lens and then do some artificial filter. But this way, the lens, the old lens, helps to hide what it is, and it actually gives it a texture. And what we did is, it appears like the helicopter, it's so small, actually, it flew in front of the TV tower, and I realized actually in the moment when we were filming this, all we need to do is do a little split screen for a couple of frames, that like a rotor, that it appears like it goes behind it, and you have the optical illusion, it must be big. And it was so simple to do at the end. And then we even, for visual effects, there are some shots where we had to do a comp. We shot it from different angles, so the visual effects team could use the actual helicopter to comp in into some other shots, so it is at least a photoreal texture. And then this is the last sequence. There is the scene in the script. The hostages are taken to the airport at night, what I talked about earlier. And it was always a story point that we don't quite know what's happening. Do they survive? Are they rescued? Because they go live on the air and announce they all made it, it's all good, happy end. Everybody's cheering and having drinks, but they didn't quite see what's happening. And I show this once and then talk about it. I saw some of the, this is one frame of the original archival footage that still existed. That was the only frame that had exposure. Everything else was black. Like there was a moment where the cameraman panned over and one of the journalists back then, they had this tungsten reporter lights next to cameraman, like a 500-watt bulb or something on a battery to light the scene. So this was one moment, there was a flare, everything else was black and you saw shadows moving. And the whole, that's what the story was built on, that they watched this at the ABC newsroom and they can't quite tell what's happening. And the guy is phoning in saying the hostages are all free, let's go live on air. And I thought like we have to use this to our advantage with, again, there was that airport, which is a historic location that still exists, but it looks very different today. There's a BMW test track around, an advertisement. So I knew even if we filmed there, we have to paint out stuff and be very limited with the angles. So on the left side, you see the actual airport, how it used to look. And on the right side is what we ended up doing. Again, there was a price tag for a CG airport, which in visual effects, they obviously want to do it right. They build it in 3D, they make it perfect, put it there, but then you make it, if you really light it the way you would for the scene where you barely see it and put the grain on and the look of the lenses, I think this again was quite expensive, and also I knew the way we want to shoot this, like this, and sometimes it's intuitive. You might not have this language developed in pre-production, but we had this feel that we wanted to handheld and zoom through the fence and rec focus from the, like Leonie Banish, the actress, as she watches, it has to be gritty and dirty. And again, if we would have put a blue screen behind that fence and put the airport in post, we couldn't have shot it that way. They say like, yeah, we shoot it stable and we'll add this all later. But I knew this is more important to actually get this energy than what we see out there. So what we ended up, and again, we had like interesting conversations in pre-production and nobody believed it would work. So I had to do a proof of concept. So what you see is not even a miniature, it's a print. So we photographed the existing part, and then our art department, they put in period cars and the helicopters. So this is now really brightly lit, but I just had a row of LED lights in front and the windows were backlit. There was a cutouts, so the windows would glow. And then we had this, I don't know, 50 meters away from the camera. And then again, because you stand there, you can say, make it, dim it a bit down, a bit darker. Okay, this looks believable. Let's shoot. And this way we could shoot all night and be experimenting and not be locked down to, we can maybe afford 3 angles to shoot that. And that, I think, created such a liberation in the way also the actors could move, and it's just a interesting approach, and you need obviously a director who's on board and a production designer, but it took lots of convincing. Like in the beginning, nobody wanted to do it, so I went out at night with an intern from the production office. I said, like, you gotta help me and print this thing, and on the office printer, like we did a proof of concept, not as nice as this, like whatever, like a 1.50 m version, and I went out in the parking lot of the production office at night, and because I knew I have this old lens that's like super funky. And once you are far enough away from an object, it's not 3D anymore, right? It's like almost like a 2D. There's no parallax, and we had the real fence and real people in front that will give us the parallax. So I shot this as a proof of concept, and then I said, okay, let's try it, and then it worked great. So I can only encourage you to be bold, and I think especially in this day and age with like AI-generated images, like I think the human touch, like whatever makes it, I don't want to say imperfect, but sometimes you also create the imperfection, but whatever makes it human, is it handheld, is it something tactile, I think the audience will feel it at the end, that it feels more human, and I think that's why we all hopefully go to the movies and love cinema. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to say again, thank you to Red and Camerimage for organizing this workshop. And if you have technical questions, there's some amazing people here from Red. They know everything about sensor formats and stuff. And if you have questions, I think we still have some time for questions. Please raise your hand, and somebody will throw a microphone at you, I think. There's a first question.
So thank you so much for this amazing workshop. It was great to get some insights. I was wondering, you seem like a DP who tries to do it as much as possible in camera. How much of the look, like the grading, you did like before you shot? So how much of it did you have like on the monitor on set?
Yeah, I think that's very important. I tried to get it 95% to look like I think in the early days when color grading came up, people started shooting whatever on a camera in log, and then they, especially in commercials, I heard a story, they gave like a log image to the colorist and then they make the look later. I think it's so important that the director and the editor, they all get used to the footage, you all know this, get it as close as possible. So that's why I always do this test with the right lens. We develop one show LUT for the whole project, maybe sometimes two if it's very different looks. Load it into the camera, that's the beauty. You load it in the camera and then you see right away on the monitor when you operate, the director, producer, everyone gets that image. The editors, you can burn it into the dailies, you can even record the proxies with that LUT burned in. So we had a workflow that we did amazing things in the color timing, but it was really refining. Like in this specific case, we did a grain emulation. Like I shot 1600 ASA to get the texture. I always feel when you shoot a perfectly exposed image and then you add grain on top, you always feel it that it's not natural to the footage. It doesn't want to be grainy. But if you expose at the limit, and then you can add a bit more if you need it. And so we did a slide pass on always the same amount in the dailies, and everything else was in camera, the lenses and the lighting and the show LUT. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. My question is actually like follow-up for the look with the like grainy look. Usually we always trying to add like grain in a post to achieve this like film look, but I wanted to ask you about the digital noise, because sometimes when you shoot, as you mentioned, like higher ISO, but like even like higher than the base ISO the camera has, it creates some kind of distinct look, like the digital noise can sometimes destroy the details, but I think something else appears, and like what are your thoughts about that?
I would say, if you want a filmic look, close your eyes, my friend from Red. If you can shoot film, if you want that look, right? It's the easy thing. But in this case specifically, I knew sometimes you watch modern films that are shot on film, and they were exposed well, they were scanned in 4K, and then they end up look, the color pipeline shows they look almost digital. This can happen too. So it's not like a just shoot film, you get the film look. And here we wanted something specific. So we did. You really have to test your camera. There's different cameras, different sensors. Some even different manufacturers have several sensors. Like I found, especially on the Raptor, when you boost the signal, that it doesn't look like digital noise to me. Like it's very, the random pattern, it looks very, I don't want to say, it looks natural to me. It's not a digital noise, but I know there are especially some lower end cameras that use noise reduction and internal sharpening. Like just make sure you shoot a camera that can shoot raw, there's no noise reduction, there's no sharpening happening, because that stuff really creates this blotchy film, and then make sure it gets maintained, because some colorists, if you don't maybe have the luxury of working with the same colorist all the time who knows your preferences, they might in their workflow have some note where they denoise and they think that makes it better, and then we can add later. But I always say keep it in there, whatever's in there, even if it's not perfectly consistent, because that also adds to, if you we've all seen movies, I don't know, like if you watched a movie on 35mm from, they were shot on film, they're like with printer lights, there's every shot has a bit different like printer lights or a scene. You never complain about it, it actually adds the richness to, I think it's dangerous if it's the perfectly same grain pattern, but all I can say, test your cameras at this extreme level if you want to go there, and make sure that it shoots raw so there's no artifacting happening. There's a question far up there on the left. Maybe we can bring a microphone there. I don't know if you can see that gentleman. Or if there's another question before, we can bring a microphone up there. Let's go maybe on the way. Do we have a microphone? There's somebody up here, and then we go to the far left.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on aspect ratio, and when you plan and how you choose an aspect ratio, and also regarding to this film.
Yeah, that's also interesting. There was the obvious choice would have been shoot like 4:3 or like 1:3. There was the time, the TVs, and then everybody says like, oh yeah, these rooms are so tight. Why would you want to shoot widescreen? But I knew early on I want to shoot widescreen, actually to show how tight it is. Like by having a close-up of the actor and you see the wall right next to him. Like it's all, you can argue either way. Like it's like when they shot apparently Jurassic Park, the argument was we have tall dinosaurs, we need a tall format. You can argue either way. It depends how you do your composition in the frame. But I felt, especially because it's so claustrophobic, I want to see the world as much as possible. And then you see the wall or you see the open space. But this is, I think there's no right or wrong. I think you have to feel comfortable with it. And I felt, we talked about it several times in pre-production with the director. I just didn't feel comfortable with doing 4:3 or 1:8:5. I felt like, I sometimes instinctively I felt like this has got to be widescreen. Like this is a world, this was a big event, even if it takes place in a small space, we need to make the audience feel the scope of that event. So that led to scope. But I think there's no right. If you feel this is the format I feel comfortable in that context, go for it, it will be perfect. Like sometimes you see movies like, especially Camerimage, you see all kinds of different formats. Sometimes people change it throughout the day. I think as long as you feel confident and comfortable with it, I think it's gonna be right.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to ask a question about these miniatures that you mentioned, because I feel like, you know, past days when miniatures were more popular, it was quite common to use particular scale for some objects, and I just wanted to ask if you measure it anyhow, or you just test it till it looked good, because I've heard that for some objects it was like 1/8 to 1/16 per particular things. Just wanted to ask how was the... So
yeah, that's a good question. There's some rules also, what shutters, what frame rates, and so the rule in general, I would say, at first there's no real rules in filmmaking, right? Whatever you can, we found that helicopter that size, that was the biggest we could find, that was the one, and that's maybe the only rule, get the biggest miniature you can get, like a bigature, the bigger the better, the more similar the physics are, and I did some research, there's different opinions and formula, but I don't really believe in, I realized, let's fly the thing. I had like 3 shutter frame rates in mind. I looked at those quickly, literally the morning of we shot it, like because we couldn't get that helicopter before. And I said, yeah, that's the one for that shot at length. And then that work great. And today the benefit is, because people today, they hear miniature, they're like, oh my God, like, especially visual effects supervisors, they get scared because they think of these bad examples from the past. But today we have digital technology. So what you could do, you can comp to scale a human next to it, or you can comp like signage that's to scale that would have been impossible, or like the problem was always water and fire. Now you can comp in those elements and get the best of both worlds. It doesn't always have to be, oh, this is no visual effects, it's practical, and then there's this conflict of who does what. So ideally, you work together and use the synergy of both. Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, in the front, in the center.
Apparently you spend a lot of time looking at those lenses and creating cineflare, and you also seem to have the opportunity now to previs the effects on it. And there are companies and plugins out there already that try this on a level. What do you think about that? Are you planning to do something like that?
I think, yeah, that's emulating lenses in post.
Emulating,
basically.
yeah.
I truly believe like I mentioned earlier, get the real thing. Like, yes, there's might be a million reasons why shoot something clean and do it later, but film, like a director I worked with one time, he said, like, at some point you have to commit something to film. Like, you can endlessly discuss and keep things open for post, but first of all, we might not be involved all the way through post, and some person makes the decision or is not even aware of that whole universe of lenses and applies something or doesn't apply. Like, if you can, like a language for each film hopefully has its own language. That's why I always feel like this is the goal. Let's create something where not a single shot can be intercut with another movie. Like, if you see a frame from The Matrix, you might have a feel, this is the world of The Matrix. What is it? Maybe it's a bit green or whatever. But so if your film creates this language, and that's sometimes developed through, like, in testing, pre-production, but then also while you are shooting with your lighting choices, lens choices, and it's nothing that can be developed on paper. And I think also the other creative partners, like a production designer, director, or visual effects supervisors, it's not that they would offer this up. If we as a cinematographer don't put it there, it will not exist. And there might be cases where I would say, let's shoot it clean and emulate it later, but I would always say, go with it clean. Like I know there's some plugins, especially when it comes to flares, it's super difficult. Like, all CG flares I see, they look like CG flares. What I do sometimes because I have this big archive, on the movies I color grade. Sometimes you have even mismatching, a shot, reverse shot, where the sun went away in one direction, one actor is in sunlight, the other one is a little overcast, and you crank in grading as much as you can. If that doesn't work, then I use literally either freeze frame or a couple of frames of a flare plate overlaid, like in Resolve or whatever system. Ideally in grading, you can fine tweak the level, and with a keyframe you fade it in for a blink moment, and it really helps to sell it. But I'm a big fan of getting the real deal and committed to film. There's another question up there.
Thank you for the great talk, first of all. And I was wondering if you operated yourself, and if so, do you have any insights on working with these lenses and these? You said you were shooting basically oneers in tight spaces, and if you have any unique insights about that.
Yeah, that's a good question about operating, because like on bigger movies, I always work with operators, and we have 2 cameras or 3 cameras, so I have to be next to the director, and we interact and watch this in real time and figure out for the next take what to do. So I think there's a time and place to be really by the monitor with the director. But on this film, this was so intuitive and small. I knew this, it's like you have to feel that in a moment. And I had my fantastic long-time operator, Stefan Sosna. He was operating with me on B camera, so there was a perfect tag team. After maybe the first day, 2-3 shots, like, we grooved in fast to realize, like, if you're here, I'm here. We know this can intercut, because we always wanted to use that one take to intercut in this long oneer. But especially when you use like vintage lenses or anamorphic lenses, some lenses, they have quite a fall off towards the top. I see this happening when you have operators, like world-class operators. Sometimes they come in a project and it's not their fault. They don't know, or they might not have the sensitivity. They go, what's the framing they're used to? but then suddenly in a close-up the eyes are soft. They will never, the focus pull is like fighting, and you will never get it sharp if you frame. You need to get a certain headroom. Like I know my lenses, and then I know exactly how to frame, or in that moment you have the freedom to, now you get this flare and stuff like that. Other people might avoid it. I think where it makes sense, I think operate if you can. And we built the cameras stripped down, really like the inspiration was like a 60mm kit, like the monitor, super compact, so we could be in this small room, and then like I'm not a professional operator, like it was nice and light, and I could give it to my team in between. So I think it depends on the subject and the story. There's a place for both. Thank you. There's a question up top to the right.
Hi, can you share a little bit more about the color? So maybe other than recreating a 70s aesthetic, the emotional arc that you may be trying to do with colors?
Basically, like what we did in grading, or in general, the color palette chosen, you mean?
Both, then.
Yeah, so basically, I watched a lot of 70s films and references. That's why I find it fascinating when people watch this film. They say it looks like the 70s, but I would argue it does not. The 70s was all lit with tungsten lighting, so the shot on film, that you get a certain brown blacks because of the tungsten lighting. And here we had those monitors, so I wanted this cool feel for many scenes, not all the scenes. But cool blue light we usually associate with something more modern, like a modern control room. This still had to feel period. So this was a balance I tested a bit, but even throughout the shoot, I marked in the script which scenes could be very dark and cool blue, with the monitor being the justification for the cool light, and where can we be brighter and warmer, because I also wanted this, if you have a heavy topic like this, you need some light moments in between so you need to be warm and bright. So in between the broadcast, somebody switches the house lights on, the lights come on, flicker on, and we went warmer. So we pre-programmed different basically 4 color temperatures for those tubes. So I could choose, we could quickly say, now we go and scene 28 in the hallway. Sometimes you have to sadly shoot out of order. And I could quickly tell my lighting team, let's switch all tubes to warm fluorescent, standard flicker. We had this terminology, like standard flicker is one you cannot tell that it's flickering. And then warm fluorescent lights. And then you always have to obviously decide what is your key color temperature. I know some people shoot always daylight, 5600 Kelvin, or when you shoot tungsten, they go 3200. I usually pick one white balance for the whole project and light for that white balance. And it's really, there's no rule for me, like I change it. I wish I could just stick to one, but there too, I remember while we were filming the first day, like I couldn't decide between, was it 4800 Kelvin and 4600, like 200 Kelvin, like most people, but it felt like the world to me, the difference when I changed it. And once you get used to it, it's like, because I didn't want the whole film to feel cool blue, like this would feel, maybe as an audience member, you feel distant to it. So basically I can only say we had juxtapositions, different warm and cool tones, and we had the green dirty fluorescence. So if you remember old cheaper fluorescents, especially when you film that on film, they had a green spike. There's a spike that our eye usually cannot see, but the film would pick up on it, and also digital sensors because of the red, green, blue Bayer pattern. If there's a spike, you see this. So there was a room where the technicians are. We call this the transmission room, where they did the live broadcast and working with cables. So like, these guys, they get the cheap fluorescent, that probably the executive office with like Peter Sarsgaard's character. He has the more white neutral lights. And so we walk from one room to the other in different color temperatures. And I think this is nice to get this variation. Thank you. Another question in front.
Thanks very much. And I was just wondering if you expose using a light meter, or whether you use false color, and if you could give any guidance on, for those darker scenes, do you have a kind of rule in mind about how many stops under you might put skin tones? So.
Yeah, that's a good question about exposure, light meter. I do use a light meter, not all the time, especially when pre-lighting, because sometimes we don't have a camera yet. So I always decide, based on testing of the lenses, I decide what stop I want to shoot at. And then usually I shoot the whole film or scene at that stop. And here I knew the maximum we can go is 2.8. That was the speed of the T2.8 of the zooms. And also didn't want to get this super shallow depth of field, because it would, like if you would have used super fast lenses, you get this romanticizing portraits that would have felt wrong, because we also wanted a 60mm aesthetic. So I knew 2.8 is the minimum, so I forced myself to light to a T. At first I thought I'd try to force myself to light to a T4, but that didn't work, so it was to 8.5. There's something, I don't know if you feel this too, when you overlight something that's supposed to be low light, it never feels right. So I lit for T2.8, basically with a meter overall, and by eye first, lighting all the rooms, and then we go and going with a camera and fine tweak. And I never use false color. I don't know, when I see false color, I get a headache. I don't know about you. When you're so laser focused on the image, you see like there's this green fluorescent tube in the background. I mean, somebody like a DAT or something, a DAT I never work with, and he presses false color, and then suddenly because this purple thing, like my head explodes. So I always, when I go in camera prep with the team, I always have to delete all the false color shortcuts so that I never see it. So I use like the amazing thing on the red cameras, they have the histogram, if you ask me, the advertisement, the best histogram, and that traffic light system where you see exactly where your exposure sits. And I only use this always in the bottom of the monitor. And so especially that's counterintuitive sometimes, right? When you have very low light scene, you don't want to boost your ISO and underexpose too much. But in this film, I have to say, I went all over, and I thought this is a great place to experiment, because I thought when we went into this, maybe nobody's going to see this film. It's like this tiny, like we went there, friends from film school. Because there were also no windows in the sets, I felt like nobody's ever going to see us. So let's shoot this at 3200 ISO. And usually would say, no, I have to adjust that light. And so like, let me push this, and feels right, let's shoot and rather give the energy to the scene. So I say light meter for pre-lighting, and then the histogram and the traffic lights I use for exposure. And it drives me actually nuts when I shoot with a camera that doesn't have that, because then I feel suddenly blind. Like then you have to use a false color, because the meter alone doesn't show you really what the sensor sees. Any more questions? Maybe 2 more or so, because we have to wrap it up soon, and then I'm still around. And if you want to nerd out on lenses, you can scan a code and play with cineflares if you really want to deep dive. But maybe 2 more questions, and then we would wrap it up. There's one question over here. It goes all the way to the other side.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the ambient light flickering sync. So the base thing was the frequency of the screens, and then you have adjusted the shutter and then the flickering, or was it the other way around?
So basically, we shot in Germany, so the monitors are PAL, they flicker at 50 hertz. So we had the shutter like 1/50th of a second, and then you still see a scan line sometimes. The scan line is the analog TV moving from top to bottom. And this, again, I found if it's perfectly synced, the scan line is it's not visible. But then the monitor, I felt it looks like a blue screen burnout, and we didn't want this. We had all the live feeds for the actors to react to. So sometimes you turn the camera on, and then you see that frame coming in, and you can, strangely, I realized this while shooting, when you change the sensor format from, let's say, 8K to 6K for a second, it resets the sensor, and then suddenly the frame line is somewhere else. And then you have to start shooting, because after a couple of minutes, it starts drifting again. So I sometimes try to, like say there's Jim McKay, the moderator, I don't want the scan line to be right in his eyes, but maybe in the lower bottom of the shirt, that adds something to it. If you want to play it safe, the scan line is completely out, but it might be a bit clean. So basically we had this 1/50th shutter, and with refreshing the sensor, I could well learn. On film cameras, you had this pitch button, you can adjust your pitch, and then the sync is slightly off, but on digital cameras that doesn't exist. But changing the frame rate or the sensor resolution gives you that control.
Simultaneously, you've been checking, you were checking whether the ambient light flickering works the way you wanted it to.
So this you had to judge on a monitor, and that's a fun story, but the producers, they sit next door and they walk around. Like we had a couple producers on the film. They're all amazing and made this possible. But like one, and he's a good friend of mine. Like he's like always came to me like, Markus, what's going on with the lights? Are they broken? Because I was really concerned. Because by eye it looked way more extreme than what you see. So because I judged only from the screen that it feels right, but by eye it was 5 times stronger. And I was like this is a problem, this is a problem. I said, no, please trust me, this is going to be great. And I didn't know 100% either because I had never done it. But I said, please trust me, it's going to be great. And yeah. Oh, this means our time is over. But thank you so much for coming and have a great festival. Thank you.